The reworked Yuntal Wild Arrows has made its way onto a few ADCs as their rush item for this patch. Ambessa has now been released, and like most brand new champions, she's not been performing all that well on the analytical side, but that's to be expected. What do you guys think of Ambessa so far? Is she weak, too strong, or perfectly balanced? Let us know down in the comments below. And did you know mastering your champion will boost your win rate by a massive 9% on average? That's why at SkillCapped we offer Smurf commentaries. Simply select the champion you want to master and get guides from challenger experts teaching how to play your champion in the exact rank you're stuck in. You're even guaranteed to have all your questions answered by that very same challenger expert. After that, take one of our 5 brand new courses that teach you the secrets to carrying as a top laner, jungler, mid laner, AD carry, and support. It doesn't stop there. We have new Season 14 courses on macro, wave control, trading, setting and hotkeys, CSing, vision, mechanics, low elo mistakes, the list goes on. The best part, you can try all this out completely risk-free. Since if you don't rank up while actively using SkillCapped, you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below right now to get the rank you've always dreamed of. Alright, let's start off the video by talking a little bit about League's newest champion, Ambessa. If you guys are looking to pick Ambessa, then definitely check out our starter guide where you'll get a more in-depth look at how to play her. Power-wise right now, as with any new release, it's pretty difficult to pinpoint exactly where Ambessa should be placed on the tier list. You really can't look too much into win rate to determine strength because players have yet to optimize Ambessa. So far, we have a pretty good idea of what the most optimal setup is looking like for the champion though. Eclipse is the cookie cutter rush option right now. However, Voltaic Cyclosword is what's winning the most as a rush. However, it's pretty underplayed, so until more data rolls in, it's hard to say if Voltaic is actually better than Eclipse. Voltaic does make a ton of sense on Ambessa though, just due to the fact that you'll be stacking up the energized passive proc on the items super quick while you're dashing around. Shojin or Black Cleaver are looking like the best second items for Ambessa. It really just depends on what the enemy comp consists of as to which one you choose. Against a tankier comp, go Cleaver, and against squishies, Shojin will work best. As for the rune page on Ambessa, Conqueror and Grasp both have viability. Both have near identical win rates, so it really depends on your matchups as to which you take. Into tanks or ranged matchups, Conqueror is definitely superior, but against other melee fighters, Grasp can be of good value to help you early on in lane. Early game is where Ambessa can run into issues, so by taking Grasp, it does help her in those shorter trades, as she doesn't really want to take extended fights early on. If you fall behind on Ambessa, she does feel quite weak just due to lacking any powerful CC or teamfight presence, so opting for Grasp to help out with that early game works well. As for Ambessa's tier list placement, she's in a pretty solid spot right now despite her overall win rate, so we'll be placing her in the A tier. So it turns out that solo lane Swain has actually benefited the most from the 14.22 buffs, as he's outperforming support by quite a wide margin. If you can pick Swain into champs who lack mobility and can't just dash right on top of you, then you can have some really good success with him as a top laner. It's just champs that can very easily dodge your E and that can gap close very quickly who you'll want to avoid, like Aurelia, Renekton, Fiora, and Yone. Swain top is definitely not the most blind pickable character, just due to having his fair share of pretty bad matchups, but he's worth playing now as a counter after the buffs he received for 14.22. So we'll be adding Swain to the top lane tier list, placing him in the A tier. So here's how we have the top lane tier list assembled for 14.22, as the OP tier is going to stay the same as how we had it for pre-patch, with Malphite leading the way. Wukong is being moved up for mid-patch, as we were more focused on jungle Wukong for the pre-patch tier list that we forgot to factor in that top lane Wukong would also be benefiting from the buffs. Both buffs were actually really nice for top lane Wu, because mana going up gives his early laning more strength, while W cooldown dropping by 4 seconds opens up for more trading opportunities early in lane. With W available, Wukong's trading pattern is so difficult for enemies to fight back against, so the fact it's now up more often just makes his bully power in lane that much better. Especially if you're looking for a good counter to Darius, then Wukong is the play right now, as his armor stacking from passive and ability to easily dodge away from the sweet spot on Darius' Q makes it a pretty Wukong favored matchup. So don't be sleeping on the Monkey King for this patch, as he's being propped up into the top lane S tier. One other adjustment we have made to the top lane tier list consists of moving Udyr down into B tier. The nerfs were issued to target the power of jungle Udyr, but top lane has suffered just as much due to the fact that his R was nerfed quite hard, and that is the ability you max out first for top lane. Back in the jungle meta as one of the best champs for the first time all season long is Wukong. The buffs this patch have even exceeded what we were expecting going into it. Wukong has been dominating 14.22, specifically against other AD junglers. With how Wukong's passive works, he gains bonus armor when fighting, so he's up above a 52% win rate in matchups like Lee Sin, Viego, Kha'Zix, and Nocturne, who are all picked a ton in meta. The fact that AP junglers like Lilia and Udyr were nerfed pretty hard for this patch is amazing for Wukong as well, because a more heavy AD-centric jungle meta is so much better for him. Everything has been aligning super well for Wukong as of late, and he's being moved up into the jungle S tier for mid-patch. One jungler who ended up losing a lot of power to start off 14.22 was Lilia, but it was not solely because of her direct nerfs. Of course, the nerfs did factor in to a certain extent, but Lilia was actually bugged at the start of the patch, which is why her win rate had dropped so hard. It was Lilia's E that was bugged, not applying the slow for the correct duration. So even though Lilia's win rate will end up being deflated this patch due to the bug popping up at the start, she's really not as bad as her win rate will suggest due to the bug now being fixed. So we won't be moving Lilia further down the tier list as she will remain in the jungle A tier. If we take a look at the jungle tier list now, the OP tier is going to be more sparse for this patch as it's Graves who will stand alone. We noted in the pre-patch tier list how the adjustments to Ghostblade were actually net buffs, and the changes have propelled Graves to new heights. Win rate of Graves actually went up even more than we were expecting, as it's seen about a 1% spike. If you're looking for an answer to play into Graves for 14.22, then the buffed Wukong is one champ who's been finding better success than most junglers. The double gap close from Wukong allows you to stick onto Graves quite well, and the armor stacking that Graves has from his E is not as effective against Wukong, since Wukong's Q reduces armor. All the other junglers who were changed for this patch, being Lilia, Udyr, Briar, and Vi, did not see their power deviate from what we were expecting going into the patch, so there's no further movement for them on the tier list. The only mid lane change that ended up landing impactful for 14.22 were the nerfs to Corki. Corki has seen just over a 2% loss in win rate so far for mid lane, but has not fallen quite as much for bot. Reason being is that the nerfs that Corki received were to his mana and AD growth, and since mid lane Corki is able to achieve levels faster than bot lane Corki, he's going to feel the effects of these nerfs more heavily. Bot lane Corki is definitely still in a good spot, but mid lane Corki is relatively weaker now, so we're going to be moving Corki down into the mid lane B tier for mid patch. So if we have a look at the mid lane tier list now, we were pretty spot on with predicting how the changes would land for 14.22. Anivia was nerfed, but the changes did not significantly reduce her strength, so she remains in the S tier. Katarina and Fizz were the two assassins buffed for this patch, and as expected, Katarina did end up gaining more power of the two. Swain's buffs have put him back in a good spot for mid lane, so he's definitely worth pulling out now as we've got him in A tier. The Sylas and Syndra nerfs have reduced both champs' power by a decent amount, but not to the extent where you should stop picking them for solo queue, as we've still got Sylas in S and Syndra in A tier. Moving on to ADC now, it's been a pretty eventful patch for the role, with Yuntal Wild Arrows now being a legitimate option on a few champs. Jinx is one in specific who has been thriving the most with Yuntal, as she's been rushing the item to a lot of success. If you guys didn't read the patch notes, we'll have the Yuntal tooltip up on screen here, but basically what Riot did is completely rework the passives and also give the item attack speed in exchange for less AD. So you can now opt in for a very AD heavy 2-item core consisting of Wild Arrows into Infinity Edge. Since Wild Arrows now provides attack speed though, your consistent DPS power is still quite strong, especially with lethal tempo ramping up. So right on time for Arcane Season 2, Jinx is now back to being one of the best solo queue ADCs as we are moving her into the OP tier. As much as many of the ADC mains won't like us for saying this, if you want some of the easiest elo from the bot lane for 14.22, then start playing Swain. Mages played bot are always super controversial, but right now Swain is just in an absolutely ridiculous spot due to his buffs this patch. At the time of making this video, there have been over 15,000 bot lane Swain games played, and he's got a 55% win rate. You go Malignance into Rylai's for the 2-item core, and then the Keystone Rune is Conqueror to amplify extended fight power. We never really move mages into the bot lane OP tier just due to the fact that they're not played that much, but if there's ever been a mage worthy of an OP tier promotion, then it's 14.22 Swain. So with that said, Swain will be placed in the S tier as one of the most powerful carries of the patch, and if his play rate does pick up over the next patch or so, then we may eventually move him into OP. Diving into the complete ADC tier list now, we've got 3 champs in the OP tier for this patch, being Kate, Kog'Maw, and Jinx. Other than Jinx, a few ADCs who seem to have some viability with the new Yuntal Wild Arrows include Caitlyn and Aphelios. We are seeing Wild Arrows bought a decent amount on Twitch and Zeri as well. However, alternative options for those champs are performing better. Twitch is still better off rushing either Blade of the Ruined King or the Collector, while Zeri is liking Static Shiv more. Ashe is one ADC we mentioned in the pre-patch tier list who we thought could work well with Yuntal, but it turns out that Kraken Slayer is still the better rush option. In regards to the Static Shiv changes, it doesn't really look like anything meta-breaking has come from the adjustments. The same champs who succeeded with the item last patch are the ones finding the most success in 14.22, so continue rushing the item on Kai'Sa and Zeri. So it turns out that a few supports were actually bugged to start off 14.22, and one of those champs was Vel'Koz. Now, even with Vel being bugged though, since he was directly buffed, his win rate actually went up, so with the bug now being fixed, we should see Vel's win rate increase even more throughout the patch. It was Vel'Koz's E that was bugged, as it was not reducing the missile speed based on distance traveled like it should. As for Vel's tier list placement, we had moved him up into OP for pre-patch, and that's exactly where he'll be staying as we reach the midway point of the patch. A support who's been picking up traction over the past few patches and who's back in a great spot for solo queue is Tahm Kench. Tahm has been one of the lesser played supports for quite a long time, but just recently his play rate has been on the rise, while his win rate spikes even higher as well. For a while now, Tahm has been a pretty sleeper, running a more traditional tank style build instead of going supportive. Rushing Heartsteel has been great for Tom, and Unending Despair as a second pickup is extremely powerful too. Matchup wise for Tom right now, the only meta champ that you want to try to avoid is Senna, so as long as you ban her out, then you're golden. Tom will struggle a little more against heavy peel ranged supports like Janna, but she's not being played all that much right now. At the very least, if you use Tom as a counter to other melee supports like Rel, Blitz, Thresh, and Nautilus, then you'll be having a great time on the pick. So we'll be adjusting Tahm Kench's tier list placement for mid-patch, giving him a push up into the support S tier. For the support tier list, we have a couple of additional changes to discuss for mid-patch, the first being that Poppy is now moving back into OP tier. We really thought that the base AD nerf would be enough to drop Poppy out of OP, but she's continued to hold up extremely well. Poppy has now been nerfed multiple times, but her power level has remained super high, which just goes to show how insane she actually was a few patches back. Senna was bugged at the very start of the patch, so if you noticed her win rate spiking a bit, that was the reason for it. We underestimated the Maokai changes during the pre-patch tier list, so he's getting bumped up into the S tier for mid-patch. The base stat buffs have heavily outweighed the E movement speed nerf, as Maokai's win rate has shot up almost 3% due to the changes. Maokai is a support who wants to be aggressive early on in lane, looking for those all-in plays, so more health and movement speed has been a nice boost to help amplify that even more. It's kind of sad for Swain's support players because the role that he's most popular in is by far the role that he's the weakest. Support Swain is just so much weaker than carry Swain right now, sporting a 47% win rate, while top, mid, and bot lane Swain are all well above a 50% win rate. If you really want to play Swain right now, choose any role but support or jungle, as he's being placed in the B tier. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit skillcapped.com and see the difference. So that's going to be all for our 14.22 mid-patch tier list update. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.